see what we can do. Hey, no problem. I think we're going to get back. Yeah. Oh, Kevin. Mike.
It's 7:07 p.m. Let's try to get everybody back and reconvene this meeting. We'll give it another minute or so. I'd like to do roll call again, just to make sure we've still got everybody here. Clerk Treasurer Aldrich, are you back?
Yes.
Would you like to conduct a roll call again, just to make sure we've got everybody back from the recess?
Sure. Gail Connor.
Here.
Sandy Flora.
Here.
Spencer Kingery.
Here.
Mike Isley.
Here.
Cody Nelson.
Here.
All right, so we're going to resume this budget workshop. We are now, we're going to go back to the general fund and finish out with the last department, which is the aviation department, the airport. Manager contract, 5% increase. Mowing contract, we kept the same. Snowplow contract, we did bump up, I guess I'll back up. The Board of Aviation Commissioners did recommend that the City Council adopt this budget. At one of their public meetings, they did discuss a proposed budget for 2021, and this is what they came up with. So in snowplow contract, they bumped it up another $500 to get to an even 3. Snowplowing does cost $600 a pop. They try to minimize the amount of times that they do plow snow out there. They want to make sure, I believe it's over 2 inches on the runway, and they do require the airport manager to call their contractor before he'll come out and plow it. However, it is likely that you could get 5 plows in a calendar year, so that's why they recommend bumping it up to $3,000. Does the council have any discussion regarding the personal services of the airport? All right. Hearing none, office supplies bumped it up $500. Airport fuel kept it the same. Lighting supplies kept it the same. Any discussion regarding the supplies of the airport? All right. Moving next to services and charges. Consulting marketing, primarily they use this for the fly-in, drive-in, or just fly-in. However, due to coronavirus, we didn't have that this year, so they didn't have, or at least halfway through the year, didn't have any expenses for consulting and marketing. As long as, if coronavirus goes away by next late summer or fall, they like to have that event, so I'd recommend we keep that in there. Building insurance has gone up for out there, so they recommended bumping it up another $850. Liability insurance should be fine at $2,000. Telephone should be fine at $2,000. Electric, keep the same. Gas, propane, keep the same. Miscellaneous maintenance, they recommended bumping it up another $2,000 to a total of $6,000. You guys have questions regarding services and charges of their airport?
Why do they want the maintenance to go up $2,000?
Minor improvement, mostly, well, not improvements, but maintenance on the terminal building. They have had issues with the hot water heater out there. It is an older structure. They also have some fencing, some other infrastructure that does require maintenance throughout the year.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. President Pro Tem Connor, you had something?
Can you give a brief overview of what's covered under liability insurance?
I'm sorry, you were cutting out once again at the beginning. Could you repeat?
Can you give a brief overview of what is covered under liability insurance.
Clerk Treasurer Aldrich, you want to take a stab at that?
The liability insurance covers the present board, the present manager. It also covers airplanes there. If any of the airplanes would actually come in there and do damage to the hangars, it's a liability insurance, a basic liability plan.
Is that gonna cover the courtesy car?
I have no idea. That's up to them to get quotes for it. They do not use our insurance. They have separate insurance. Now, at the same time, we have the trolley, which technically is stored out there and Brian Sturm uses. You know what? That car insurance, I better talk to Brandy, because we do insure an old snow truck out there that we gave them. It could be that insurance would be covered under that car would be covered under our liability. I'll call Brandy tomorrow about that, but I'll confirm that for sure. But their other building insurance, and then they have a liability insurance that is separate from our insurance.
Okay.
All right, any other discussion regarding services and charges of the airport? All right. Under capital outlays, miscellaneous upgrades, they recommended increasing by $2,000. Equipment, a decrease of $5,000. And then currently we don't have a grant match for FAA grant. Miscellaneous upgrades, that would be more substantial work on the terminal buildings, such as roofing, reconfiguring of walls, which probably needs to be done at some point in the future, but may not be done next year. It would very likely be contained to the terminal building or any vehicles that they have out there. Do we have questions regarding the capital outlays for the airport? All right, hearing none, we'll move next to edit.
What about court department?
Oh, sorry. We do have the court department. We have it at 0 for everything because we don't currently have a city court judge.
Okay,
Thank you.
yep, thank you.
Edit fund, estimated revenue, DLGF said $135,286 based on they're using 90% of 2020. I did it before I got the DLGF numbers. I came within $200 based off of 2019 figures. So that 135 is the estimated revenue. Ending this year, once again, this is a conservative kind of worst case estimate. We started the year with $625,000 in reserves and edit. The additional appropriation for sidewalks is $110,000. Additional appropriation for the COVID grant is $100,000. Now we're hoping, that we don't have to cover that with edit and that we get reimbursed from the state for all of that. But it is a worst case scenario if we didn't get reimbursed for anything. And then we also had 30,000 encumbrances from 2019. Then we add in our expected revenue for this year and the budget. We used all of our budget, and we would get a conservative kind of worst case scenario estimate of ending this year with $406,000. Moving through the line items, we did have $25,000 in here for community development director for this year. with coronavirus and not wanting to bring additional people into City Hall, we have not used out of that budget. And I apologize, I didn't put the amounts spent or used halfway through this year for 19 for edit. I think I just limited it to the general fund due to time constraints. But we have not spent out of community development for this year. My recommendation would be to increase it by $15,000 to try to get a contract employee who could work here maybe 3 days a week, doing both community development and code enforcement in 2021. It may be worth exploring, talking to Laura and seeing if they would like to share a contract employee who'd split their time between Delphi and Flora doing code enforcement and community development. Let's have a discussion on this line item first before heading into the rest.
I really like that concept, and I think that that is definitely something that we're going to need to discuss and see about finding a position for. So I would be in favor of having that in the budget.
Thank you. Other discussion regarding that position?
I would agree with that.
I think since we don't have anybody hired or any looking at interviewing at this point in time, and these are non-reverting funds, so this money's not going anywhere. I'd like to see it be nothing again like it was a few years ago until we actually do something. And then at that time, based on the contract we go into, whether it's part-time with Flora, full-time for Delphi, then we appropriate the funds at that point in time.
All right. Other discussion from the council?
So is Flora, are they on board with sharing a code enforcement person in community development?
No, for the purposes of, I know that would probably be the headline in next week's comment. I'm not saying they are completely and totally in favor. An initial discussion has been had with one of the town council members who is interested in the concept, but I cannot speak on behalf of the entire Flora Town Council in saying that they are completely in agreement. But I think it is worth exploring. We did something similar with animal control quite a few years back, where Flora and Delphi shared an animal control officer to before the county instituted animal control. But it is something that a member of their town council has expressed interest in doing.
Thank you.
Which member?
That's interesting.
Somebody's phone.
Somebody's phone, yeah. Nice background music.
Who's it coming from?
Reminds me of disco.
Just a reminder that while you're on
It's
hold,
from
you
Shane.
dial 0 for the operator or dial another extension at any time. Please continue to hold. Your call.
Hello?
Hello?
means they should have planned on a break.
Do we know who it is?
It's Gene.
Sorry about that. I got kicked off of my phone.
That's okay.
You guys still there? I believe the
Yeah.
question from Gail is which member of the Florida Town Council is present? Is Councilman Jake Adams? Did we have any other discussion regarding this line item? All right, moving down, office supplies, we have it at 5,000 for this year's budget. To get a contract employee, I would recommend keeping it at 5,000 for a contract community development director and code enforcement officer for next year. Postage, I would recommend stay the same. Same with consulting. EDC contract, I believe the maximum that we could pay is $30,376. So I reduced that down to 31,000. Telephone mileage, promotional, dues and seminars, Main Street and facade grant. I recommend staying the same for next year. We have discussions regarding these line items.
Nope.
I think again with office supply, until we know if we're going to have a code enforcer, community development, $5,000 seems like an awful lot of money to budget contingency. What is postage used for edit?
For stamps and mailing, yeah, primarily.
Mailing what?
Whatever, well, for community development and code enforcer, it'd be notices for violations or for building permits. In terms of community development director, it could be sending out surveys to businesses, to residents. There's a lot of stuff that you could mail.
So a lot of what you have in the budget here is contingent upon code enforcer. What is edit
Combined code
promotion?
enforcer and community development director.
What's edit promotional being used for that you need $20,000?
That would be on promoting the city of Delphi through various media.
And nothing's been done with that in the past couple of years?
That would be because the
I'd
last
have to
couple of
look
years,
at that, Carol. I can take.
What?
Sorry, go ahead again.
Shane, that's because you have not had a community development. You've had no one doing anything with that office. There was plans to put someone else back in and it never got done. But the money stayed in the budget just in case that would have happened. But it did not. It did not happen for a code enforcer or community development. And if I can say something else to you, council, right now, as keeping the finances. you're looking at increasing and you're putting in for 2021 for both the community development and code enforcement. If you do not use it, this money doesn't go anywhere. It stays right there. But you do make less work for me. Because if you don't put any of this money in the budget to allow for it if you could have it. Now that granted, keep in mind that gives you from now till that time to develop a plan for what you want with the community development and the code enforcer. And it gives you time to work with Floor and get it set up. But it gives you money in the budget to operate. If you don't have it in it, then an additional appropriation would have to be done. And granted, DLGF is not concerned, that's a record only, but it still is paperwork and it's still a process for us to do in this office. If you put it in the budget, you make it so easy to continue and to do the things that you want to do with this code enforcer and community development person. At the same time, you can't tie their hands if you get someone hired and not have office supplies, not have the ability for them to function in the position you're putting them in. But if you, at the same time, can't get something developed, can't get something figured out, and don't use those funds go nowhere. They stay within edit. They can't be transferred. They can't go anywhere else. They stay permanently in the edit fund. Now, if that, hopefully that helps you a little bit.
Well, it sounds like we should leave them there then. We should leave it where it's at then.
I agree. It sounds like it's no
Other
risk.
discussion regarding the edit budget?
Yeah, where did the 20,000 in 2018 go in edit promotional?
I'm gonna have to get that for you, Gail. I believe we must have transferred it to another line within that 300 series.
They got transferred where?
I don't know. I'll have to get that to you tomorrow.
Another question. You had a meeting
You
with
cut out again.
EDC today, correct? Did you have a
Correct.
meeting today with EDC? Did you sign the contract?
Correct.
What amount?
Yes.
What amount?
A maximum
Say
of
again,
$30,376.
That's
A
what you
maximum
signed
of
the contract for?
$30,300.
The Board of Works asked
A maximum
you to
of
find out.
$30,000.
The Board of Works asked you to find out what.
Did you get the amount?
The lowest amount was, I did. The Board of Works asked you to find out what was being paid by, the least amount that was being paid by an entity. Did you find that out?
We won't know that for next year. But for this year, I believe the county's paying, oh gosh darn it, I did find it out. I believe it was $974 per capita.
And why are we?
But we won't know
budgeting
next year
money-
yet.
Why are we budgeting money to Main Street when we don't have a Main Street?
For the purpose of getting one up and running.
And I have, nothing else. Thank you.
Other
Oh,
discussion from the council?
Yes, I did want to share that the 30,000 some odd dollars that were encumbered from last year needs to go back into edit because there was no contract to encumber those funds. So in your explanation page at the beginning of this fund, that money that was encumbered, it needs to be put back because it was not encumbered legally. There was no contract.
There was an invoice. I would disagree with the legality. However, you are correct in that it's already in the edit fund right now. It's just earmarks for that encumbrance. So it'll just stay there.
Yeah, it needs to.
Discussion from the council regarding edit. Anything further?
Nope.
I'm in favor of keeping it as is stated on the paper.
Yep. I agree.
Same.
All right. We'll move on to the fire territory budget. Department head or Chief Dillon, do not believe is with us here tonight. This is the budget. It's not the budget he presented to the fire territory board. They did recommend some tweaks to his budget. They have not made a formal recommendation on his budget, and I will probably butcher it a little bit, so bear with me here. In terms of tax revenue, if we do an 80% conservative value, we'll end up right around 148 for 2021. That probably is a little lower than what it will be. It'd probably be more likely 155, 160. That's for the 427 fund. For the 428 fund, using an 80%, very conservative average, it put us right around $50,000. So moving into the line items, Chief Dillon recommend keeping everything in personal services the same, except for the addition of firefighter run pay. So this would be a new line item. It would be aimed at increasing firefighter participation. Each run or training session that they had would be counted as a point. And based on the total number of points accumulated by all the firefighters during the year, you would get a pro rata amount of that 15,000. So let's say you were, there was, for easy numbers, there's 1,500 points that all the firefighters got throughout the year, and you got 150 of it, you would receive 10% of that 15,000, which would be $1,500. This is a new concept for Delphi Fire. It's not a new concept within the state. Volunteer firefighting or fire departments are struggling throughout the state based off of commuting patterns, age of membership. Really, commuting is probably the big one. A lot more of your firefighters used to work in town, say a decade or more ago. So they're getting lower numbers. So this would be aimed at trying to encourage more people to, I guess, discussion amongst the council, recommendations that they would send back. This isn't, I guess, fully ready for, total approval because the territory board will make a recommendation, but then you would to be sent back to Chief Dillon and the Fire Territory Executive Board regarding personal services from 427.
I think the firefighter run pay is a good idea. Before we had the paid ambulance service, they did that here in the county, and you had about 40 some volunteers, and you got, it wasn't much, but you got a little bit of money to do a run, depending on if it was during the week or on a weekend. It wasn't a paycheck. It wasn't anything. You just got a little bit for doing the run. It's a little incentive. And I think that would be a good way to do some retention with our firefighters and just a little extra to say thank you. So I think that's a good idea.
So, as the fire department, fire territory
Other than-
liaison, Dan Doolin, when I spoke with him, the chief or captain, I don't know what his title is, but he talked to me about this idea and kind of for the reasons Shane's said with the firefighters aren't living around here, aren't working around here as much. This is a way to incentivize a little bit more of making those runs. I think it would be kind of scary if we continue down this path of we don't have that many people actually conducting runs. So I'm for this.
Yes, we want to keep our fire department. We have a good fire department in this town. We want to keep them.
And something, it's not in this year's budget and it may not be in the budget for 22 or 23, but a lot of volunteer fire departments are talking about moving to having a part-time, multiple part-time positions to ensure that during the week there is somebody at the station that could be that first one to respond. If current trends continue, it may be a possibility that the city of Delphi sees that a couple of years down the road. I'm not advocating for it tonight. However, I just wanted to bring it to your attention that in future years, don't be surprised if you do see our department or other volunteer fire departments in the area move to trying to have a part-time person that's on station and can respond during the week when most people are at work. Moving down to their supplies for the 427, he did recommend a reduction in postage, fuel and oil, miscellaneous supplies, and gear. He did put in an increase of firefighting equipment and supplies, and he wanted to pull that away from miscellaneous supplies just to make it pretty clear that this is, this is firefighting equipment and supplies related. Just to try to clarify a little bit more, I cannot remember what's firefighting equipment, specifically compared to miscellaneous, but he did make that recommendation to split it out to clarify it. And he did try to reduce these line items, knowing that there's going to be increases in annual service and testing, which we'll talk about here in a little bit, and then increases in capital expenditures within the 428 fund. But he felt confident that he could reduce those line items with the addition of the firefighting equipment and supplies and be fine for 2021. Is there any discussion regarding the supplies for the 427 fund? All right, hearing none, he did make some reductions to schooling, consulting fees, travel expenses, building insurance, computer maintenance, vehicle maintenance, building maintenance, with an increase in annual service and testing. Once again, this was a line item that we could have taken out of a couple different line items, building maintenance, vehicle maintenance, but he wanted to make sure we had a dedicated line item for annual service and testing I think to spur in our minds and in the minds of the fire department that we have that there. We need to be doing our annual service and testing, and to make it clear that this is kind of separate from the other maintenance line items. Discussion regarding the 427 fund.
Shane, quick question.
All right.
What is
Hearing none,
the-
there's nothing else in the other
hold on.
capital outlays or. Sorry, go ahead, Sandy.
What is the annual servicing and testing? What are they?
So that would be testing of I believe it's air packs. They have the machine that fills the air packs at the station. They have testing required on the vehicles, on hoses.
Okay,
So it would be testing on the equipment that they use.
okay. Thanks, I just wanted clarification.
Yes, ma'am, no problem. Anything else regarding the 427? All right, moving into the 428 fund. Let me scroll. So when Dan initially proposed it, I can't remember which line items he had it in. He kind of had it split out between 3 line items, and the Fire Territory Executive Board recommended you just put it all under capital expenditures. We will, unless Cody or Gail, do you remember what he talked about for the additions for the 428 fund?
I know he talked about wanting to have it put back out and delineated more so that the money is put into specific line items and not just one lump sum. He had a concern about that.
Do
He
you remember the
really
specific
thought it
items
should
that he
be,
mentioned? I believe
Generator.
He turned out here, at the last couple of meetings, he talked about turnout gear and just the equipment, things that, the line items that are already there. He did talk about, setting up something for run billing. And, I just know that he mentioned that. Question why they're being charged for telephones when they don't have any telephones in the building. And he mentioned he would like to see this go back to being separated out.
Thank you. I do remember, so Cody, you said the generator, the turnout gear, and then the other one was their infrared cameras for detecting, or heat detecting cameras for when they're on a scene. They can identify where there's hot spots within a building. So the turnout gear and the infrared or heat sensing cameras were the 2 additions, the $7,800 additions, and the $44,200 could be spent towards, likely a generator would be the biggest priority right now. However, that could change in terms of their capital. Discussion recommendations from the council to send back to the fire chief and the Fire Territory Executive Board.
I think if he wants it delineated out, we need to give him that option to do it and revise his budget.
All right, anything further? Okay. I'm taking notes. Give me just a second, then we'll move into other funds. Okay. So there's some other funds, the city of Delphi. I don't do as in-depth as I did for general NBH LRS edit. They are important funds of the city of Delphi. But the first one is solid waste. Based on previous years' revenue, it's anticipated we'll bring in about $118,000 in revenue. The primary expense for solid waste is our trash contract. We put in $121,000 for 2020. We also have expenses in miscellaneous office. We have advertising when we send out either ads for spring cleanup or the service calendar. And then we do have some software and computer for administering solid waste. We give me just a second. We started 2020 with just shy of $110,000 in solid waste. We have been slowly going into the red on solid waste, really since its inception, since the city started getting it under contract. We can continue to bleed $3,000 or $4,000 a year and be fine for a significant period of time. However, at some point, the city council will likely have to do a rate increase on solid waste. I believe if we bumped it up to, it was in my financial analysis, I think it was $11.50 a month. Either 11 or 11.50 a month would put us about break even from where we are currently. Current solid waste rates are $10 a month on your water bill. So at some point in the future, the city council will have to take that under consideration. However, it's not necessary at this point. We can spend on reserves. Are there any questions regarding the solid waste budget? Any discussion?
Yeah, I was just going to talk about how we'll definitely need to do that next year. The thing that I seem to notice in our history is that we kind of wait until the last minute to make rate increases or like even example increasing employee wages. Then when we do a percentage, it seems like a shock to people. So I want to make sure that next year we, I guess, get on increasing what we need to increase for solid waste so that it doesn't come to a shock to people. Like say 5 or 6 years down the road, it's a higher rate.
Yes, sir. Any other discussion with the council? All right, we'll move next into rainy day. Rainy day budget for other capital outlays has been $100,000. I believe even extending before 2016. You hope in a year you don't have to spend this money. There have been occasions, specifically floods, where you're tapping into these funds. Now, occasionally, if it's disaster worthy of it, we could get reimbursed for some of the expenditures if enough property is damaged across the state of Indiana. So this is in here really to protect the city of Delphi if we do have a disaster and need to spend some funds. So I would recommend we keep it at $100,000 to be able to respond quickly in the event of an emergency. Is there discussion regarding rainy day?
We explained that up to 10% of the budget can be put back in from unused and unencumbered funds at the end of the year. What that would be at the end of this year, if we potentially have those unencumbered and unused funds, how much could go back into could go into the rainy day fund?
Give me just a second. I believe it'd be 220 or 240,000.
Thank you.
Yeah, it'd be 10% of whatever our budget is for this year, somewhere between 220 and 240. I can't remember for 2.2 or 2.4 for this year.
Okay.
Other discussions regarding rainy day? Hearing none, we'll move next to CCI. The state does estimate we'll have a distribution of only $6,481 in 2021. Historically, we have budgeted $15,000 for this for improvement. My recommendation would be we set it at that $6,300 for 2021.